This reporting happening by the New York Times. Robert Mueller in his Russia investigation now widening the scope yet again to include now the president's tweets. He's looking at obstruction in his inquiry. And what he's looking at is the tweets that the president has put out against former FBI Director James Comey and Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Those now are coming into play for the Robert Mueller investigation, according to the New York Times. Judge Andrew Napolitano is right on time, as always, with breaking news. And I have heard you say, well, they're not really looked at by anyone. They are kind of a thing that the president puts out. That actually has changed on the record, as far as we know, in recent weeks.
Yes.
These would be older than that.
Right. The Supreme Court, we talked about this during the break, when it upheld the president's travel ban, decided not to look at his statements as a candidate. That we know. The court's not going to look at what a person said before the president. Will the court look at, if there is litigation over this, what the man says as president? Yes, Bob Mueller knows that those tweets are a treasure trove and a window into Donald Trump's thinking. So here's the allegation. And apparently this story is true because Rudy Giuliani, the president's chief lawyer, has verified it because he's quoted by the New York Times as having spoken to them about it. The allegation is this: did the president send messages to people of threats or rewards via his tweets? People whom he knew or expected would be interviewed by Bob Mueller. And if he did, was he engaging in witness tampering, which is an independent crime? It's a species, it's a part of obstruction of justice.
Well, we know all about that with Paul Manafort.
Yes. Yes, so that's what the New York Times is breaking, and that's what we're talking about here.
I still can't get past.
Let me just get the Giuliani quote in here, since the judge referenced it. So he did speak, Rudy Giuliani, to the New York Times. Quote, "If you're going to obstruct justice, you do it quietly and secretly, not in public." He was referring to more typical obstruction cases where prosecutors will focus on measures taken in private, like bribery, destroying evidence and things like that. But that is the one initial quote from Rudy Giuliani in this article.
But I still think Judge Ellis, I still firmly believe what Judge Ellis has said in the Manafort case.
That's the trial judge in the Manafort case.
Yes, that basically Mueller is gunning for impeachment or prosecution here, because we were talking about Rod Rosenstein earlier. That's the same guy. And speaking of conflicts of interest, this is the guy who laid out the case for firing James Comey and then appointed a special counsel to look at things like obstruction of justice. You look at James Comey's own
but
memos,
in the Manafort case, wasn't there like a ton of evidence that he actually was doing what they were saying? In fact, didn't they stick him back in the pokey?
But not in relation to Russia interference.
Yeah, I mean,
having
so
nothing
that's kind of different.
But having nothing to do with Russian interference. James Comey's own memos demonstrate that President Trump told him to investigate to get to the bottom if any of his people did anything wrong. The Inspector General's report lays out the case against James Comey's firing as well.
That's not what this New York Times piece is about. The New York Times piece is about examining anew the tweets and whether what appear to us to be the president's tweets are actually messages to human beings that he knows are going to testify. And do those messages contain a threat or a reward? If they do, that could be witness tampering. That's at least what the New York Times is saying.
I wanted to ask you, Judge, in addition to public attacks, which we have seen by the president on Twitter, does it pose a problem for the president that there have been tweeted his offers of pardons and also ideas of pardons surrounding individuals?
Look, the president can pardon whoever he wants for any federal crime, even a federal crime not yet committed, as the Richard Nixon case. Mm-hmm. The issue is there a pattern in these pardons intended to send a message to people who are going to testify against the president before Bob Mueller's grand jury, and would he influence that testimony?
I would like to just step in here with a couple of those tweets. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has taken a very, all caps, weak position on Hillary Clinton's crimes. Where are emails and DNC server and intel leakers? And that was back on July 25th, almost exactly a year ago now in 2017. A day later, the president doubled down, criticizing both Mr. Sessions again and Andrew McCabe, who was the acting FBI director at the time. Why didn't AG Sessions replace acting FBI director Andrew McCabe, a Comey friend who was in charge of Clinton investigation, but got ... And that was exactly a year ago today, July 26, 2017. So to Lisa's point, I mean, some of this has been out there. Some of this we have seen.
These things are innocuous. There's no suggestion of a crime in these.
I don't understand how it works into. You'll have to explain it. Just how does this work into Mueller's thing about obstruction? I mean, I see Lisa's question now. When you really drill down on the tweets, what's there?
The Times suggests usually prosecutors will look for one slam dunk piece of evidence.
Right.
I can recall many single emails that someone who was prosecuted sent, like Frank Quattrone, eventually exonerate, clean up those files.
They must be looking for a pattern.
They're looking for trying to stitch together episodes.
Yes.
So that would tweets on top of other things, encounters, other pieces of evidence to build a case.
The most dramatic news here is to contradict what Rudy Giuliani said about 4 months ago in this building, that the Mueller team had given up the ghost on obstruction of justice. Not only have they not given up the ghost, they have a new rabbit hole down which to go. And in that rabbit hole are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tweets that came out of the president's mouth.
All right, let's move on. This is breaking news this hour. We have the president in Iowa talking about the American work.